Week in, week out, sickness and injury take their toll of a country's greatest asset, its manpower. Hospitals and doctors play their part, but still, for various reasons, a man may not be fit for work. At one time, he'd be classed as unemployable. Today, the answer to the problem is industrial rehabilitation, through schemes operated in some cases by private industry and on a national scale by the Ministry of Labour. Here at Wadden in London is one of the Ministry's 15 rehabilitation units. For psychological reasons, it's deliberately set in the heart of an industrial area, and to the unit come people from all branches of industry. Men and women who haven't worked for months, perhaps years, because they're still convalescing after serious accidents or illness. Through a system of self-help plus sound vocational guidance, most of these men and women, within 6 to 12 weeks, will be made fit for work. But how? For each has his own special problem. Victims of industrial accident, polio, asthmatics and TB cases, neurotics and psychotics, unable to bear the stress and strain of modern life. A cross-section of industrial humanity, but none fit for work, and none knowing exactly what is going to happen to him. The first step is for the superintendent of the unit and the social worker to put them at their ease, to meet them informally over a cup of tea and tell them what it's all about. The social worker explains to each new arrival that it's her job to help with any personal or domestic problems, which often hinder a return to employment.
In the meantime, here is the rehabilitation officer who's going to tell you something about the unit.
Morning, ladies.
The superintendent is in charge of the whole operation. He establishes contact right from the start. Everyone at the unit, he explains, will follow a course which will lead him back into industry. It's his job, through his team of specialists, to guide and follow the progress of each entrant. Personal contact being the keynote all along the line. In the first week, every member of the new intake has a personal interview with the social worker and with each of the unit's other specialists. The medical officer, who has to assess what physical strains a man might safely bear, both while he's on the course and when he goes back to work. Then the chief occupational supervisor has to find out their industrial background, what sort of people the unit is dealing with, and how far they're able to help themselves. Also during this first week, in addition to the personal interviews, the industrial psychologist conducts special intelligence and aptitude tests. And they're also seen by the resettlement officer, who's in touch with the employment exchange in each man's area. He's the unit's job finder. These then are the specialists, guided by the superintendent. Practical people in practical surroundings. Their primary job, to observe, diagnose, and gather every relevant item of information until they've got a comprehensive case history of each member of the new intake. A course at an industrial rehabilitation unit is essentially practical. The mere act of grasping a tool is a great step along the road to recovery. And from the very beginning, the work is actual production work, something which will be used or sold. The first week is spent here in the intake section. Assembling, planing, filing, plaiting chairs and stools, simple jobs. But at this moment, the nature of the job doesn't matter. What is important is the opportunity it gives for finding out something about each person's residual capacities and the attitude to work in general. All the time during this first week, the unit's officers diagnose, question, observe. Bill, a one-time steel erector, for example, used to an active open-air job. Can he face up to an indoor job for the rest of his working life? What sort of work is he fit for anyway? It must be a good job. He's got a wife and 3 kids. And how far is he really affected, mentally as well as physically, by the loss of his leg? What possible course can his life take now? Alan, a clerk, a neurotic with a long record of psychological illness culminating in a complete breakdown. Failed at his old job and too scared to go back, completely lost faith and belief in himself. Will such a man ever be fit for work? How can this lost faith in himself be restored? Young Harry, an asthmatic, had innumerable jobs with engineering firms since he'd left school and never held one for more than a few months. If it's raining when he gets up in the morning, he's quite likely to pop back into bed again, permanently on the run from reality. How will he react to a course at an IRU? And what qualities has he that can be developed to the advantage of himself and industry? Janet, perhaps the toughest proposition of them all, an efficient secretary till polio partly paralyzed her. The disability embarrasses her, and so does that everlasting wheelchair. How will she be now, working with others? How far is she handicapped? Is there a place for her in office or factory? Many, many questions, varying with each individual. And it's the job of the unit's officers to find the answers. A thorough examination early in the first week enables the doctor to determine a man's physical capacities and his general mental state. And where physical or mental illness is concerned, the unit is more interested in how handicapped a man is than in the nature of his disabilities. The trouble with Alan and people like him is purely psychological, but they're still sick people. The doctor is able to assure him that at least he's physically fit, and that if it's likely to help, the advice of a psychiatrist can be sought. Take Bill with his artificial leg. The resettlement officer has to find if he can travel with reasonable ease, or if he's to be found a job close to his home. Bill's world has undergone a cruel and violent change, bringing a profound mental reaction. For there's more to losing a limb than just its physical disappearance. Helpful information comes not only from each entrant, but from their various employment exchanges, and in the case of the industrial psychologist, through group psychological tests. With Janet, as with everyone else, he is anxious to find the sort of work that will interest her. It's not much use suggesting something that a person's not particularly keen on. Janet is a girl of good potential. In some way, that potential has to be developed. It's the same with Harry. Somewhere behind that disgruntled, chip-on-the-shoulder front that Harry presents is a rational human being. Right now, he's a mass of inhibitions and frustrations. He feels he deserves a superior job in engineering, something important. Yet in actual fact, he isn't able to apply himself to the simplest tasks, can't even clock on to time. The social worker discovers that his problem has its roots in childhood, when his home had been split by divorce and other unhappiness. From now on, she has to find what family adjustments or changes in environment are necessary, what has to be overcome, what accepted. And so it goes on. Observation, diagnosis, questioning. Each person receiving the same painstaking attention. Each officer adding his own bit to the story until the picture is complete. Then, at the end of the first week of assessment and testing, the superintendent and his team of specialists meet in case conference. Only tentative conclusions can be drawn at this stage, but each case is thoroughly discussed. Everyone's suitability for the whole 6 to 12 weeks course is assessed from the various aspects. Medical.
He's a boy of 17 who is suffering from aphasia, the result of a brain injury when he was a child.
Social.
He comes from the country. His parents are coming to visit the unit so that we can get their opinion.
Psychological.
Well, I think of learning a skilled trade, but he'll have to be taught by demonstration.
Technical.
Yes, well, his seagrassing of 3 stool tops showed a good hand dexterity.
Industrial.
Without training, I think we're going to have great difficulty in getting this young man into a satisfactory job.
The team discusses each person's probable ability in regard to various trades and skills and tries to find out what kind of job will interest him most, be his anchor. Once that's done, they can place each man or woman in a specific workshop group, for it's in the unit's workshops that the road back really starts.
Passive side of the table infection has done quite well at that.
Everyone taking a course at an industrial rehabilitation unit has a common aim: getting back to work and staying there. But each case is individual. Therefore, the treatment has to be individual also. There can be no mass production when it comes to reshaping human lives. Bill has been used to heavy industry. That's out for good. But in the workshop, he's found to have some skill in light precision work. He's interested in radio and television, and at the case conference, they've suggested he might be suitable for training later on as a service engineer. But first, he has to be tested to find if he has the aptitude and the skill with small tools that this kind of work requires. There being quite a difference between man-handling steel girders and working with wires and grub screws. Alan has been put in the woodwork section. He's got a simple, pleasant job. But if your life's filled with failure, you're scared to have a real crack at anything in case failure may return. He's even scared of people who are trying to be his friends. So before the unit can get down to thinking of specific jobs, Alan has to learn to work with strangers, mix with them. So he's put to work in the gardens. There's peace in a garden, and a man can work with others and yet be alone. It gives him a mental and physical toning up. The Education and Commerce section gives an educational toning up and also tests out potential office workers. A few simple lessons will show if they can learn quickly and if it's really the job for them. For example, an ex-shop assistant suffering from arthritis. She can't work in a shop anymore, but she might be suitable for, say, a bookkeeping job. If not, they'll try something else. Janet goes back on a typewriter because she fears her illness might have affected her ability. She has to be tested to see if she can be made fit for the kind of work she'd been doing when she contracted polio. Bill is to be considered for subsequent training elsewhere. He's in the education section to find if he has the intelligence to respond to that training. Progress on the course just has to be logical and sure. There's no room for slip-ups, not with people like these. An industrial rehabilitation unit doesn't give specific training itself. There are separate government institutions for that. But suitable guidance is given by the occupational supervisor. Harry was already something of an engineer. He feels the whole line the course is taking is definitely quite unsuitable. A chap with his potential doing a routine job at a lathe? Ridiculous. But why ridiculous? With his previous experience, plus the right sort of a job, there might be a really good future in light engineering. But can he do a steady day's work and stick at it? He can hardly expect to be works manager if he can't even clock in on time. Can he really do that job without whining? That's the big question for Harry. And for the unit, too. Harry wasn't an isolated case. There's often a negative reaction early in the course, particularly in neurotic cases. On the other hand, there are reactions which can be too positive. TB cases accepted in IRUs, some 20% of the entrants, are almost invariably optimistic in outlook. The vigor and enthusiasm with which they tackle a job often retards their progress. They have to be shown how to work within their physical limits. A great thing about these units is that people aren't working in artificial surroundings, but in a genuine industrial atmosphere and setting. Industrial rules and conditions apply throughout, and in that way, the transition from rehabilitation unit to industry proper becomes all the easier. The unit's workshops also help experienced men recover their skills which they may have lost through sickness or accident. A refresher course. Again, disabled men can adapt their disabilities to machines with which they're likely to work when they get back on the job. Practical experience in the workshops. Physical medicine in the gym. There's a gymnasium attached to each IRU. Here they can supplement hospital treatment and continue remedial exercises. At Wadden, there's equipment for exercising arms and legs. A rowing machine for chest, leg and back injuries. Stationary cycling for leg, hip and ankle exercises. And the chance to beat your neighbor round a racetrack if you're feeling on form. And for people like Bill, there's a simple white line painted on the floor. Bill is trying to get his game leg to behave like his good one. To a disabled man, appearances are most important. He wants to look his best when he approaches a prospective employer and show that he's really fit and ready for work. There's plenty of Swedish drill and so on in these gymnasiums, and also a good helping of team games. The games are not only an important exercise in themselves, they help to re-socialize a man, build up his self-confidence. For Alan, this, like the gardens, is just the job. What Bill, Alan and the rest put into their course, so much will they get out of it, for this is a self-help service. A self-help service. Yet by the mere fact of working side by side, they learn to help each other. If you see someone worse off than yourself, it usually helps. It makes you think. Some, making good progress, feel there's no need to stay the full course. Hearing of a good job, they'll naturally want to go after it. The unit's officers always investigate and advise on the suitability of jobs and the needs of employers. But sometimes their advice is not accepted. So the impatient ones are permitted to go and find out for themselves. They set out in high hope. This may not be just a stage on the road back. It may well be the end of the journey. And what if the good job's on the second floor and there's no lift? It's a factual sort of world. Janet and others like her have to learn how to live and work with their disabilities and find ways round the unavoidable frustrations. Through his contacts, the resettlement officer can arrange visits to prospective employers. For some, like Alan, this may be a crucial stage in their course. The unit doesn't tell a man what he must do. It tells him what he's best fitted to do and what sort of job is likely to give him the most satisfaction. This is scientific vocational guidance in the fullest practical sense. The rest is up to him. The final aim of industrial rehabilitation is to place everyone in the kind of employment for which he's best suited. The team of specialist officers follows each person's progress right throughout the course. When they meet in final case conference, they have a clear picture of everyone's capabilities and can make specific recommendations. 1. A man may be recommended for training in a new skilled occupation, the unit being confident that he can respond to the training. That takes care of Bill and others like him. 2, a man will be able to go back to his old job, and Harry has a much better chance than he's had so far. 3, employment can be found for disabled cases, such as Janet, with a sympathetic employer. And 4, some are advised to enter a different occupation in a semi-skilled capacity, and Alan is at last able to face up to a job. At the end of their course, they will no longer be unemployable, but men and women going back to work. Now, and for 6 months after the course, the road back made easier by the care, experience, and understanding of the unit's team of officers. Each case discussed painstakingly, thoroughly, objectively, none being left till there was full agreement, each officer contributing his special skill. The industrial psychologist, the chief occupational supervisor, the resettlement officer, the social worker, the medical officer, the superintendent, who guides and coordinates the work of the team and the unit as a whole. A team of specialists, each dedicated to the job of industrial rehabilitation. And that is the story, not only at Wadden, but at each of Britain's 15 IRUs. Sickness and injury will continue inevitably to take their toll. But just as surely, week in, week out, over 150 men and women will start out from Britain's rehabilitation units on a new lease of life.